Well, back, and guess who I'm back with? Look who's over here. There is Dr. Dan Brubaker. If Dr. Dan Brubaker is in the scene with me, you know what this means. This is the new course. This is his course. This is the one where he actually expounds all of his expertise on the Quran. This is the Quran course that you've all been waiting for. It's coming up in just a few weeks on June the 19th, Monday, June the 19th. And it's called A Historical Assessment of the Quran. This will be the second time, actually, that Dan has taught this course. He did it 2 years ago in 2021. And what he's going to do exactly as the title says. He's going to expound on the historical problems, the historical ability, what the Quran was, what it is today, how we came to it, what are some of the internal problems with the Quran. I'm going to let him explain each one because this course is 8 sessions, 8 lectures, starting from June the 19th, going right up to August the 7th. That's every Monday night, as we do with all of our MAPI courses, every Monday night, going from 8 o'clock in the evening Eastern time up to 10 o'clock. That's the lecture period, and then we open it up to Q&A after that. Now, Daniel, you're here. This is your second time you've done this course. What I'd like you to do, could you kind of walk us through the different lectures week by week by week, and just tell us what you're going to do? Give us a summary, an overview of what we should expect.
Sure, Dr. Smith. Yes, this is going to be a pleasure to teach this course for a second time. And the course is, as you said, an overview of the critical introduction to the Quran, a historical look at the Quran. And we're going to start out the course by not assuming very much from the students. People may be having different starting points, but we'll start broad and then go deep into a number of different specific areas in order to give a good solid background. But of course, the first thing that that I always try to do is to not assume that everybody knows what the Quran is. And actually, the question of what is the Quran is it could have many different answers. But we want to begin the course on that first week by having a general overview of the when the Quran came into being, when it's first attested as a physical object, and what it is, how it's structured and laid out, what sort of themes it deals with. We'll deal with many of these things in more depth later, but also to just understand from the inside and from the outside what we're talking about when we talk about the Quran. What it is, or what you understand it to be, has a bearing or an impact on how you approach it and start to the sort of questions that you ask when we look at it. And we're asking some very interesting questions, and we're not alone in that. Many people are doing that, but it's important to begin by having sort of an overview of the Quran. Many people don't even realize what the Quran's contents are, that it deals with biblical themes very heavily, that it mentions people that you see appearing in the Bible frequently, not all of them, but many of them, and also that it has some very important differences, both theologically and structurally, and in terms of the style of the literature and so forth. So we'll talk about all those kind of things.
Dan, what I would like you to do now is just go through for each week. So starting with week 1, what is the lecture on? Then week 2, what will be the lecture on? Week 3, what will be the lecture? One by one. Yep. So the people who are watching, they want to know exactly what you're going to be lecturing on, what they should expect. Starting with week 1. Go ahead. Over to you again.
Yeah, so week 1, I have readings for each week set up to sort of set the stage for the discussion. In week 1, we have a book by Michael Cook, The Quran, a Very Short Introduction. This is Oxford University Press. Some people watching this may be familiar with Oxford's series that seems to have become very popular, Very Short Introductions. Well, Michael Cook is a recognized, established scholar of the Quran, and so we're going to start out by taking his nice little very short introduction and talking about that to get that overview that I was just mentioning. of the Quran. And then we're also going to be dealing with Watt and Bell's introduction to the Quran. Watt and Bell are both scholars of a couple generations ago, and they wrote a very good scholarly and critical work among many that will help us to also set the stage. And then we'll look, as we will do throughout the course on that night, I'm going to be having students go through actual texts. We're going to be interacting with the Quran itself. So chapter 3, Surah 3 of the Quran will be read in preparation for that lecture, and we will talk about it, and just to begin to get a feel and talk about the themes and contents of that, students' initial reactions, and that will form the focus of our study that night. So that's the first week. The second week, we will begin to go a little bit more into the history. We'll talk about the traditional account of the Quran's history, how it came to be in our hands today, 13, 14 centuries after it first appeared on the scene. And we will look at the critical scholarship. We'll begin to look at the critical scholarship and the current state of it, which has changed actually in some respects since a couple of years ago when we first taught this course. But many of the major outlines, as you know, Jay, have been the groundwork has been laid by people like Cook and Patricia Crone, and many of the scholars. We'll be talking about introducing many of these people, these names, and some of their work throughout the course, without trying to overwhelm people with the vast breadth and technical nature of it. We'll go into some of the technical stuff, but we're doing a little bit more from Watt and Bell in that second week, and I also have assigned as a reading some section from Michel Kuiper, a French scholar who did an interesting look at some of the literary patterns, particularly the chiastic structures that he believes he found in the Quran. And I just want to open people's eyes to the various reasons that the Quran, it's interesting from different directions, and chiastic structures in literatures from that period are nothing unusual, but it can, when we're looking to analyze something, we want to be aware of the various ways that it can be analyzed and considered. So, and then on that week also we have a few more shorter chapters, surahs of the Quran that we'll do, and as we talk about the history and critical scholarship on that, or begin to talk about the critical scholarship. The third week, of course, the Quran is, when we talk about what is the Quran, one of the things, I gave a lecture about this down in Louisville, Kentucky, several months ago, and the lecture was titled, "What is the Quran?" As I recall, that was the lecture, that was the title. And in that talk, I emphasized primarily that the Quran is a work of theology. It is a theological argument. And so it's many other things too, but in the central core, it is a statement. It makes certain assertions, theological assertions. And so in the third week, we want to look at the major themes that the Quran deals with, and we're especially going to focus in on its theological claims and assertions, some of which are similar to those of the Bible, and some of which are 180 degrees in disagreement with those in the Bible. And we'll just lay out what those are and talk about them so that students can have a good understanding of that very, very important aspect, because that is basically at its heart what the Quran is dealing with, in my view. In the fourth week, we will look at more closely at the Quran's history, whereas we will have talked about the general overview of its history. We're going to go in the fourth week into a deep look at the way that the Quran came to be into our hands as a physical object, especially. So the Quran, as some students will know, has been transmitted orally. Many people today have memorized it completely and can recite it on command at any moment. It's a remarkable feat of memory, actually, but no, there are certain features of the Quran that make it a little bit more conducive to memorization in that way, but it's still a feat of memory to do that. But we'll be focusing in that week, the fourth week, on the transmission as a physical object. We have manuscripts that have reached us from 1400 years ago, 1300 years ago, partly, preserved on parchments, in some cases preserved on papyrus. And we will talk about how those were created, what their features are, how in some ways they are judged in terms of their age, the script styles, the application of the various types of distinguishing marks, the diacritics and the vowel marks. And from its earliest time, from the 7th century, and the progression to the more formal text and the Ottoman Qur'ans and so forth. So you can get a view of a general overview understanding of when you open a Qur'an today, how did it come to be? Where did it come from? What are its features and so forth? And this plays into its history. Obviously, when we look at history of anything really, and when you do have physical objects, those objects are really important, especially because they can be dated to the time that the object came into being. And it's a little bit different, and we'll talk about this more that day, but it's a little bit different from a historical report. If a history was written down at a certain time, then you have a moment, sort of an anchor point, that was what was understood to have happened. But physical objects are interesting because inscriptions and coins and stuff like that, they've got a date on them in many cases. And manuscripts, you may not have a date on it, but you can radiocarbon date it, and you can make judgments in other ways. So we really want to focus in on the physicality of the Quran as an object in that fourth week. Okay, in the fifth week, we will go into the different ways that the Quran has been interpreted. As we know, there are lots and lots of Muslims in the world, not as many as there are people who call themselves Christians, but there are about 1.8, maybe 1.9 billion Muslims in the world. And there is a lot of variety within among the people who call themselves Muslim around the world. So we don't want to be blind to that. But the Quran, being a work of theology, is also an object that has it doesn't just people believe that it stands alone, and there are people who take the view of the Quran only and try to understand it in that way. But there's a very large and rich and in many ways diverse tradition over many centuries of interpreting the Quran, understanding what it means here and there, and what are the theological concepts. Some of them are not disputed. They're accepted by all or most people who call themselves Muslim, but there's a good deal of variety. And so when we take a passage, and as students, the main objective on that week in the fifth week will be to understand, when a person who is trying to approach the Quran from a believing perspective, what are the sort of literatures that they're going to be looking at, the major books that they'll be reading. How are they going to be looking at this commentary? And we'll give examples from various commentaries to show how verses or chapters or themes are expounded upon by those who have looked at it from a believing perspective in the past. And we have more reading from Watt and Bell and during that period, as well as some further reading from some other surahs of the Quran. And the other aspect of that we'll be dealing with that week is the intertextuality of the Quran. So these theological themes, as I already mentioned, are related to theological themes of the Bible, and of other texts and scriptures possibly as well. And by related, I don't mean to imply, we want to approach everything from a scholarly perspective, but there are obviously points where the Quran is in conversation with other texts, and so we want to recognize what those are, and start to think about what it may mean. And also within the Quran itself, there is an important concept of what is called abrogation. There's an Arabic word for it as well. But at some point, fairly early on, it was recognized quite obviously that the Quran not only disagrees with at points with the other scriptures that it says that it confirms, but it also disagrees with itself on key theological points. And so there came to be this idea of this theological concept when applying the Quran of the Quran canceling out earlier scriptures where it disagrees with them and canceling out itself at points where a later verse disagrees with an earlier one. We'll also be talking a little bit about the allegations of textual corruption in the other scriptures, and also allegations that have been made. Well, I mean, I'm not sure how far we'll go into that of textual corruption in the Quran itself, but I think the main thing that I mentioned, if I recall back on that week, that we'll be talking about is the some of the episodes that are well attested in even the Islamic literature of moments where, such as the one that's dealt with by Salman Rushdie in his book and so forth, that where Muhammad himself had a verse revealed and then realized later, according to the traditional account, that it was not from God. And so these kind of things just raise interesting questions. We don't need to deal with or answer every single question, but the main point of this course is for students to be aware of the lay of the land and what is out there on these things. And then we'll talk also just very briefly. We've got a lot to cover in the fifth week about the alleged uniqueness of the Quran. It is often asserted that the Quran is, and by alleged, I don't mean to cast aspersions, but there's a claim made that that the Quran itself, its unsurpassed beauty, its remarkable nature, sometimes the knowledge that it expresses that is maybe way ahead of its time from the time that it came into existence, are signs of the Quran's divine origin. And so we'll think about those things and talk about them a little bit. It is not generally recorded that Muhammad did miracles, although if you look at the biography of Muhammad, you will find some miracles kind of reported in that. It's unclear whether they are early or late, or original or whatever. But for many Muslims, the Quran's uniqueness and literary qualities are seen to be the internal evidence of its divine origin. So there we go. So that's week 5. Now we're going to talk on the 6th week. We're coming up on the end here about a couple. Well, I mean, various aspects of the Quran manuscripts themselves. And some of those watching will know that this is the manuscripts have been the focus and the area of my own research and attention for, nearly going on a couple decades now. And so I've had a lot of personal interaction with the manuscripts. I've traveled around the world and looked at them, photographed them, spent a lot of time poring over the photographs and over the manuscripts themselves to think about them and see what their features are and what they contain. And so in this 6th week, we will talk about what I'm looking at. I'll let you into my world, and we will talk about the codicology, the way the codices, the preparation of the manuscripts, the binding of them into books, the various features that we look at in dating, such as the margins, the number of lines, the orientation of the page, and the script styles and inks and all those different things. And then we'll also talk about some of the textual features, the progression of the script styles some more, and then also the details of the text. Some of the one of the readings for that week is from Marijn van Putten, where he looks at the textual evidence, actually what is written on the page, and draws some certain conclusions from that. Just parenthetically, and sort of to give a teaser for that lecture, there is, well, and I have a YouTube channel that some people will be familiar with where we talk, it's titled Variant Quran. There is variation within the Quran manuscripts to a certain extent. It's not extreme in most cases, but there is some interesting variation. And so as you look at the variation among manuscripts, we're also thinking about, can you tell if there's a family history between the manuscript? Can you tell, for example, which manuscript was copied from which other manuscript, which manuscripts belong within a family, and so forth? And we aren't going to deal extensively. We don't have time to deal with everything extensively in this course, but we will talk about some of those things, and also give a little glimpse through Dr. Van Puten's paper into the way that scholars have been approaching these questions to discern whether there is, for example, in that case, an archetype that we can point back to that some people have called Uthmanic, tracing back to the time that Uthman had his campaign of suppression, where he had authoritative manuscripts prepared and then suppressed by destruction through burning or other means, anything that disagreed with what became the preferred manuscript. Yeah, on the 7th week, we're going to continue our work with Quran manuscripts by focusing in a little bit more narrowly on the work that I've done with the variants and the corrections. And so I'm going to give you examples of the corrections that some of the corrections that I've come across. We'll talk through them. I'll introduce to you the variety of the types of corrections that we look at and some of the features of them, and talk through and try and give you some new things that maybe haven't been talked about on the YouTube channel and so forth. But just again, getting the lay of the land so that you can have a good understanding, at least to a good base knowledge of what we're talking about when we're looking at the textual criticism of Quran manuscripts, as my mentor, the dear departed late Keith Small, who went to be with the Lord a number of years ago, several years ago. He wrote the book Textual Criticism and Quran Manuscripts. And so we'll be looking at that as a broader category, but then focusing in on my work with corrections as well. And we'll look at that week the work of Dr. Tayyar Altakulic, who's a Muslim scholar in Turkey who's respected in the field and has done some important work there as well. So he made a refutation of my book and published that, and which, by the way, a full, a book response to that is it's forthcoming. I'm very busy. I've been doing a lot of different things, but it is in progress. Believe me, it is being prepared, and I'm going to get that out hopefully very soon. Hopefully this summer, but I don't want to promise dates because it always winds up taking longer than I thought. So that is week number 7, and then the final week, number 8. We will just be pulling everything together in summary by talking about the popular theological and apologetic implications. This course is being offered by Veritas International University, which is a Christian university. It's geared toward preparing you. I believe many of the students are going to be Christian believers. And so to think through and understand what the apologetic implications, apologetics, of course, meaning giving a reason, giving an answer for the faith that you have, and certainly on the reverse side of that, Dr. Smith, you do a lot of work with polemics, which is being critical of things that you believe not to be true, or to sort of poke at things to see if they stand up under scrutiny, I guess, is another way of doing it, and if they do or if they don't. But so those are the two aspects of that. But we want to think about the theological and apologetic implications of what we have already studied, and think about those both at a scholarly level and at a popular level, as you are interacting with friends, neighbors, maybe new acquaintances, colleagues at work, and so forth. How can you be engaging in good and fruitful discussion of the things that really matter in life, which are these questions of who are we, why are we here, who is God, what is he like, what does he expect of us, and so forth. These are questions that are asked and answered in many ways by the Quran, and they're asked and answered by when we look at the Bible. And as we said at the beginning, those answers are different in many of the most important places in the Quran and in the Bible. So these important questions need to be considered and thought about. As human beings, this is probably one of the most important things, probably the most important thing that we will do during our short time here. So that is the entire purpose of the course, and to think about these things, to do it with integrity and thoughtfulness and respect, and to help each other along in that. I've done a good deal of work myself, and I haven't reached the end of the road yet, but I do want to share these things with you along the way. And so I look forward to this opportunity to spend these special hours with you during the period of this course this summer.
Thanks so much, Daniel. This is terrific. As you have seen, Daniel, and those of you who may not know this, Daniel is considered probably one of the foremost, or one of the foremost scholars when it comes to manuscript evidence, when it comes to the changes. This is his book, The Corrections. He's coming out with another book that will be supporting this. In fact, he'll be coming out with a whole series of books that talk about these changes and the difficulties with the earliest manuscripts. Now, Daniel is an apologist. He is an apologist. He is not a polemicist. I am a polemicist. And this whole degree is called Master of Art in Apologetics and Polemics of Islam. So both defense and offense are taught in this course. Daniel will be doing the apologetical side of it. I will be coming in and helping out with some of the polemical material, how we can use it in our engagement, in our discussions, in our debates with Muslims concerning the Quran. As you know, this is a Christian institution. Daniel just got done saying that. Therefore, this is only for Christians. I know some of you have always got upset. What about me? I'm an atheist. I'm an agnostic. Maybe I'm a Muslim. I'd like to take this course. No, this is a seminary. This is meant only for Christians. Therefore, please do not register unless you are a Christian. Now, obviously, you do need to register. And that's why we do have right down here, look there, it says info@ves.edu. You just need to write in and ask and say you would like to register for IS 506. This is the 6th course in a series of 10 courses that we're giving here. 5 courses a year, 8-week long, each one of them, always on Monday nights from 8 o'clock till 10 o'clock in the evening, and then another hour usually for Q&A. In this case, this course, IS 506, the historical assessment of the Quran, taught by Dr. Dan Brubaker. I will be there as well to be involved in the Q&A part, so to show you how this can be used polemically. But this is really his lectures, this is his material, this is his expertise, and he's going to share all this amazing 8 lectures. You've now been given an overview of them. You need to register, and you need to do so before June the 19th. Now, just to be clear, there are 3 levels of students. If you want to take this as a master's degree, this is an accredited master's degree program, then you have to do an awful lot of work, and you have to pay an awful, not an awful, but much more than the others. For a master's degree level, each unit, this course is 3 units long, so each unit is $330. So that makes it about $990, almost $1,000 if you want to take it for a master's degree. But if you do take it for a master's degree, you're going to have to write a paper. You're going to have to do the reading. You're going to have to do a reading log each week. You're going to have to do a discussion, be involved in a discussion during the week of what Daniel is teaching you. And then you'll have to do a final test, a final exam, and then write a paper. But that we will give to all you. You'll get the syllabus, so you'll know exactly what's coming beforehand with all the reading assignments week by week by week by week. Daniel and myself and Dr. Daniel Janosik will be looking at your papers. We'll be looking at your discussions. We'll be involved in those discussions. That's the great thing about this course. It doesn't just happen only on Monday night. It continues throughout the week. And we have large discussions going on between the students from all over the world. We have over 300 students now in the MAPI program from about 26 different countries. And we'll be involved in these discussions, especially as Daniel is giving these lectures and bringing up this new material. Those, as I should have said earlier about the master's degree, you have the 8 weeks of lecture, but then you have 15 weeks to get in your papers. So your papers and your final exam don't need to be until September the 25th. Though the lectures finish on August the 7th, you have another 7 weeks in order to get all the material to us. Those who want to take it for audit, if you want to take it for audit, you only pay $280. And the great thing about audit is you will then also be permitted to be part of the group that are discussing throughout the week. You'll be given a signature and a code so that you can participate in the Populi. That is our platform where we do all our discussions, where we put up all our papers, where we have our talks during the week, and where we also have the logs. So you'll be able to read on them. You'll be able to discuss. You'll be able to ask questions from Daniel, myself, and the two Daniels, really, Daniel Janosik and Daniel Brubaker and myself, so that we'll be able to engage with you during the week. That's for those who want it for audit. Now, there is a third category, and these are people who do not want it for, they do not want to be part of that discussion group during the week. They just want to hear the lectures. They just want to hear Daniel speak, and then they want to throw questions at Daniel and the other Daniel and myself after the lectures. That is for personal enrichment. We call it PE. For those people who just want to be part of the lectures itself on Monday nights, it only costs $225 for the whole course. Now, hold on a minute. You might say, yes, but I live in Europe, or I live in Africa, or I live in Indonesia, and I'm fast asleep at 8 o'clock Eastern time here in the United States. Don't worry, you don't have to be there live. We are recording every lecture. Daniel's lectures will be recording, including the Q&A periods. And then we send it to you the very next day. You get it the very next day. You get the URL so you can watch the lecture at your own leisure. Also, Daniel will be putting out PowerPoints for everything that he's talking about. Those PowerPoints will be sent to you. He'll be referring to and putting up PDFs of articles that he is referring to. Those PDFs will go to all of you. That includes the master's degree students, that includes the audit students, and that includes the personal enrichment students. You get all of the lectures and the PowerPoints and the PDFs. That everybody gets, every student gets, because I send them to you the very next day by MailChimp. Now, obviously, you need to register first, and it's important that you do register. There is the registration info at ves.edu. And tells our registrar that you would like this course, IS 506, the historical assessment of the Quran, that you would like to register for this course. You need to do it by June the 19th. That's just a few weeks away. Even if you forget to do it on time, don't worry. We will, even if you come in late as a student, we will still bring you on board and send you all the material that you miss. It will be great to have as many of you there, especially the first night, the 19th of June. Why? Because that's when we introduce all the students. We want everybody to know who the students are, so we become a family, because it's that family atmosphere that most students love. And the fact that you'll be making relationships with people from all over the world, you'll be able to see who they are, you'll be able to see them on the screen, and then can also contact them during the week. Now, obviously, these are live lectures. We purposely do this. These are not recorded except for one. There will be one lecture, that's lecture number 2. The second week, which is June the 26th, because Daniel has to be elsewhere, he will not be available that night. It's a very important night for him. He is going to record that, and we're going to release it there at 8 o'clock that evening so that people can watch it in their own time. You don't have to watch it live. You don't have to watch it that day. You can watch it whenever. And then the next week, which will be July the 3rd, he will then open himself up to Q&As from the previous week. So that's how we're going to get around that. But that's the only week that we will have recorded. All the rest of the weeks, you get to see Daniel, you get to hear Daniel, you get to question him. And believe me, I don't know if there's any question he's not been able to answer. So come on board. It'd be great to have you. Daniel, any last thing you want to say before we head out and get people registered?
Yes, I really look forward to it. It's always a pleasure to meet people who are interested in the same kind of things that I'm interested in and have done. I just wanted to make one comment on what you said a little bit ago, Jay, about being an apologist. I don't actually, being an apologist is not a disrespectful thing at all. It's a very worthy calling, but I generally present myself as a historian of the early history of the Quran. And try to do that, although in many ways, all of us who are presenting a case for our Christian faith, we are apologists. So just wanted to clarify that and make note of that.
Good. Excellent. So come on board. We'd love to see you. June the 19th. That's soon to come. So do register, get your name down there, get your material out there. And as soon as you do register, I will be notified and I will send you a welcoming email and show you all of what you need to do, what the meeting ID is, and also the passcode so that you can participate with us. We'd love to see you there. That's just a few weeks from now. Until then, this is Daniel Brubaker, myself, here on the East Coast of America. Over and out.